Before the bullets, before the battlefield scars, and before the silence that followed, she was a warrior. Sergeant Alina Reyes survived war zones that most never returned from, but it was home that nearly broke her. Steel and Silence is a raw, emotional journey through trauma, healing, and identity. It begins with a confrontation outside a food truck, but becomes so much more. It's a story of pain that lingers long after the uniform is folded away. Of a woman haunted by loss, finding unexpected strength in connection, mentorship, and the quiet courage it takes to keep breathing when everything inside you says not to. This is not a war story. This is a survival story. A story about the battles no one sees and the heroes who still fight them, one day at a time. The heat shimmered on the pavement like a mirage, bending the lines of reality just enough to make Alina Reyes feel like she hadn't really left the desert. Her boots polished, but scuffed at the solicited the ground with a purposeful rhythm as she stepped off the bus near the boardwalk of Oceanside, California. The Pacific Ocean glinted to her right, and to her left, the rows of beachside food trucks were in full swing, the smell of grilled meats and sweet citrus cutting through the salt air. It was all too normal, too calm, too soft. Alina squinted beneath the brim of her camo cap. Civilians bustled past in tank tops and flip-flops, oblivious to the whirlwind inside her chest. She could still hear the static of radios, the distant echo of gunfire in her head when she blinked too long. Her fingers twitched slightly by instinct, craving the weight of her rifle. But here, all she held was a phone with a cracked screen and a VA-issued backpack. It had only been 4 days since she got back. 4 days since the dust and screams and adrenaline of deployment were replaced by sunshine and awkward small talk. Her unit had lost 3. She'd held one of them, Rodriguez, 19 years old, smart-ass smile, barely had a mustache until he stopped breathing. The hospital psychiatrist told her to take it slow, that she didn't have to be okay right away. But they didn't understand the silence that followed war. It wasn't peaceful, it was punishing. She'd come here today for something simple, a carne asada taco, maybe a cold Doritos, just a taste of home that didn't come out of a plastic bag and powdered seasoning. As she stood in line behind a mother and her toddler, she noticed people giving her subtle glances. Her short-cropped black hair, the rigid posture, the way her hands never strayed too far from her sides. The woman behind her kept sneaking looks at the tattoo on her forearm, a minimalist eagle, globe, and anchor. Alina didn't blame her. People always had a picture of what a Marine should look like, and she didn't match it. She stepped forward, trying not to think too much. The food truck's painted flame decals reminded her of a convoy they'd lost in Syria. Her throat tightened, but she swallowed the memory. Not now. Next, the vendor called. She moved to the window, ordering in quiet, clipped tones. 2 carne asada, no onion, 1 mango, Jarritos. As she paid, the rumble of motorcycles split the air behind her. She stiffened. 5 riders pulled into the low-troring, careless and loud. Their vests bore patched insignias, skulls, flames, American flags twisted with rebellion. They parked in a crooked line like they owned the place. Engines sputtered and died, and the air thickened with exhaust and testosterone. Alina took a deep breath and moved to the side, waiting for her food. She didn't look at them, didn't even flinch as boots crunched gravel behind her. But she could feel him before he said a word. "Hey, sweetie." The voice came low and loud like a growl trying to pass as charm. Didn't know they let little ladies play soldier now. Alina's spine stiffened. She kept her gaze forward, eyes on the spinning spit of meat behind the food truck's tiny window. Her fists unclenched slowly. Breathe in, breathe out. She'd handled worse in war zones than a loudmouth with insecurities wrapped in leather. The man stepped around her, boots scraping the pavement as if to make sure she noticed him. He was big-knot, tall, but broad, barrel-chested, with a gray beard and faded tattoos that peeked out from his cut-off sleeves. The patch on his vest read, Rocco, stitched in thick red thread. A Confederate flag rode high on his shoulder like a badge of pride. "You active?" he asked, tilting his chin toward her backpack. "Or just playing dress-up for attention?" Alina turned her head just slightly. No eye contact, no engagement, not worth it. I'm just here for food, she replied, cool and steady. Ooh, feisty. Gotta say, I'm impressed. Didn't know the Corps was giving out uniforms to cheerleaders these days. That made her jaw clench. Behind her, the other bikers laughed low, guttural sounds that made the hairs on her arms rise. Not because she was afraid she wasn't, but because she knew this kind of man. She'd encountered them before, overseas and on home soil. Men who needed to diminish others to feel like they mattered. He stepped closer, the tang of alcohol and sweat radiating off his skin. Tell me, sweetheart, how many push-ups you gotta do to keep that figure? Or do they just let you smile and take selfies for morale? A hush settled over the line. The vendor paused. The mother with the toddler had quietly stepped back to her car. A few onlookers pulled out their phones, half curious, half hoping for a viral moment. Alina stayed still. Give me my food, she said softly to the vendor. Please. Rocco wasn't done. Don't walk away yet, girl. I'm trying to get to know the new face of our armed forces. Bet you didn't earn a single thing, but a photo shoot. That's when he did it. He reached up and snatched her camo cap from her head. It was so fast, so deliberate, that even the other bikers shifted uneasily. The sunlight hit her bare forehead. The thin, white scare barely healed was now exposed above her right eyebrow, a jagged reminder of a mortar blast that killed her teammate 2 months ago. Rocco held the hat between two fingers, mock inspecting it. This what they give out now? For pretend heroes? Alina turned, slowly, calmly, and looked him directly in the eye. The silence was instant and complete. My name is Sergeant Alina Reyes, she said, her voice clear but quiet. I've served 2 tours overseas. That scar came from carrying 2 wounded civilians out of a collapsed school building under sniper fire. I lost 3 good Marines last month. I came here today to eat, not to fight, not to be harassed, not to have my service questioned by someone who's never done a damn thing for this country but drink beer and wear patches like a costume. The world stilled. Rocco's hand lowered just slightly. The other bikers exchanged glances. The cameras were still rolling, phones in hands. People were frozen in place, awkward, shamed. She held out her hand. My cap. For a second, it seemed like Rocco would laugh or toss it to the ground. But he didn't. He stared at her. Then, without a word, he dropped it into her palm. She took it, brushed it off, and placed it back on her head with care. Then turned back toward the vendor, whose hands were shaking slightly as he passed her a brown bag. Thank you, she said. And she walked to the edge of the lot, every step steady, every breath earned. Alina took a seat on the edge of the curb, her paper bag of tacos warm in her lap, untouched. Her mango Jarrito sat beside her, unopened. The flavors of home what she had come for suddenly tasted like ash. She heard the low rumble of engines start again behind her. Rocco and his crew mounted their bikes. The bravado drained from their faces like spilled beer. They didn't say another word, just turned their bikes and rolled out, tires grinding gravel like an afterthought. The silence they left behind was heavier than their noise. Alina didn't turn to look. She kept her gaze on the concrete. Her fingers gripped the paper bag, crinkling it slightly. She wasn't angry. Not really. She was tired, not just from the heat or the confrontation, but from the years, the things she'd swallowed, the restraint it took not to lash out, the knowledge that if she had, she'd be the one in cuffs, not him. Footsteps approached, slow, limping. She looked up and saw an older man in his 70s with a salt and pepper beard, his gait uneven, his body leaning heavily on a wooden cane. He wore a faded Vietnam veteran hat and a Marine Corps windbreaker zipped up to the chest. His face was lined with years, and something in his eyes carried the same weight as hers, something hollowed out, not broken but worn. He sat down next to her with a grunt and a sigh, adjusting his knees slowly. I saw the whole thing, he said. Alina stayed quiet, watching the sweat drip from her soda bottle. You handled that better than I ever could have, he continued. Hell, back in my day, I'd have knocked his teeth in and gone to jail smiling. She looked at him. His jaw was tight. His fingers curled around the handle of his cane like it was a rifle stock. I wanted to, she admitted. Her voice cracked slightly. But I didn't come here for that. I just wanted to eat. I know, he said softly. But some folks don't know how to let others be. They sat in silence for a long moment. The sounds of the city returned slowly, traffic down the block. Gulls overhead. A baby crying in the distance. He nodded toward her. Name's Martin. Staff Sergeant. Echo Company. 2nd Battalion. The 3rd of March Ines. 69 to 71. She nodded back, eyes softening. Sergeant Alina Reyes. Echo Company 2. Just a few decades later. His brow lifted slightly. That right? Hell, the Echo legacy's in good hands. Alina didn't smile, but her lips tugged upward just enough. Martin tapped his cane against the pavement. You remind me of someone I lost. My daughter. She went Army. Not Mary Nesha liked to piss me off. Lost her in '04, roadside bomb. Alina's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Yeah, he said, voice thick. Me too. Another pause. Then he looked at her, really looked at her. What you did back there, that's courage. Real courage. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't posture. You stood your ground. Let the truth speak. I wish more people had your spine. Alina stared ahead, her eyes suddenly burning. I don't feel brave, she murmured. You don't have to, he said. That's what makes it real. They sat a while longer. She eventually opened her Doritos and passed it to him. He took a sip without hesitation. Too sweet, he said with a cough, but not bad. She chuckled just once. It was the first time she'd laughed since she came home. That night, Alina lay in her small apartment, the ceiling fan clicking rhythmically above her. The walls were bare intentionally. No pictures, no medals, no reminders. She'd showered twice, but still swore she could smell the sand and diesel on her skin. Deployment had a way of sticking to you like dust you couldn't wash out of your pores. It wasn't just the physical grime. It was the weight of everything that happened, and everything you couldn't forget. Her scar throbbed lightly, as it sometimes did after a stressful day. She ran her fingers along it, eyes closed, and the memories came rushing in. It was early morning in Raqqa. Smoke already hung in the air from a burned-out supply truck on the outskirts of their position. Alina had led a squad through an alley littered with broken concrete, chasing a report of a civilian family trapped in a collapsed school building. She could still hear the little girl crying, barely more than a whisper, muffled under layers of rubble and dust. She and Rodriguez were the first to push inside. He was right on her tail, his usual cocky grin gone, replaced by focus. They found the mother and 2 kids wedged under a beam, bleeding, panicked. Alina had managed to wedge a piece of pipe between the wall and the beam, using every ounce of strength to lift it just enough to drag the mother free. And then the world exploded. A mortar hit just outside the building. She never heard it. Land only saw a white flash, and then nothing. When she came to, her ears rang. Dust blanketed her vision. Her face burned. And Rodriguez, he wasn't moving. She had crawled to him, dazed and half blind, dragging him behind what was left of a wall. He was bleeding badly. She screamed for a medic, for cover, for anything. She pressed her hands against his chest, begging him to hang on, but he was already slipping away. He reached up once, barely, and touched her arm. Tell my mom I wasn't scared. Then he was gone. That's the moment that lived behind her eyes, the one that rewound every time things got quiet. Alina blinked back into the present. The room was dark except for the dull glow of her nightstand lamp. Her food from earlier still sat in the paper bag by the sink, untouched. Her stomach churned with hunger, but she couldn't bring herself to eat. She reached for the small wooden box under her bed, a weathered thing she hadn't opened since returning. Inside were 2 patches, her dog tags, and a folded letter, the one she had written to Rodriguez's mother, the one she still hadn't mailed. She read it again in the silence. Mrs. Rodriguez. I was with him when it happened. He wasn't alone. He was brave. He fought for others, not for glory. He smiled even when things were at their worst. And in the end, he thought of you. I want you to know he mattered, and he is missed. Sergeant Alina Reyes. She folded it gently. Her fingers trembled. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow she'd finally send it. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment to grieve. Not loudly, not in breakdown, but in stillness. A single tear slid down her cheek. And then, like a ritual, she whispered the names of the 3 Marines they lost, one by one, as if saying them aloud gave them permission to stay alive in memory. Then she turned off the lamp and closed her eyes. The next morning brought a sky the color of bruised steel and the scent of rain threatening in the distance. Alina sat at her tiny kitchen table, a cup of black coffee cooling beside her untouched breakfast. Her dog tags rested beside the letter she had finally slipped into an envelope the night before. Her hands trembled slightly as she sealed it. The weight of the letter felt disproportionate for its size. It was only a few ounces of paper and ink, but it carried the final moments of a son's life, the last heartbeat of a boy who had joked about becoming a DJ when he got home. Alina stared at the envelope for what felt like an hour. The address was written in crisp block letters: Angela Rodriguez, El Paso, Texas. She imagined the woman opening her mailbox, seeing the return address marked from Oceanside, and feeling her heart drop even before she tore the envelope open. She stood, grabbed her keys, and walked the block to the corner mailbox. It stood crooked on rusted legs, battered by years of salt, air, and time. With slow fingers, she dropped the letter in. And then, she didn't walk away. She stood there, both hands gripping the edge of the metal box, like she was holding on to something that might collapse under her. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard. A soft voice pulled her from the moment. Harder to let go than they tell you, huh? She turned. It was Martin again, windbreaker zipped, hat on, a thermos in one hand and his cane in the other. He nodded toward the mailbox. I mailed one just like that 30 years ago, he said. To the parents of my corpsman. Best kid I ever met. Took 2 steps too far into a rice paddy. Tripwire. I wrote them every detail. Took me 5 years to get the courage. Alina lowered her gaze. I thought writing it would feel like closure, but it just reopened everything. Martin didn't answer right away. He sipped from his thermos, then leaned against the bench near the mailbox with a sigh. Closure's a word people who've never seen war use, he finally said. There's no closing that door. You just learn how to walk beside it. Alina sat on the edge of the bench, body heavy. I was the squad leader, she whispered. I gave the order to push forward. We didn't have full intel, but I made the call anyway. If I'd waited, if I'd pulled back, Rodriguez might still be here. Martin didn't interrupt. He just let her speak. I see his face every time I shut my eyes. He was just a kid, always playing that dumb Spanish trap music in the barracks, always smiling. I yelled at him once for leaving his boots untied. And then I had to hold him while he bled out. She stopped, her voice cracking, and stared into the distance. Martin finally broke the silence. You did what leaders do. You made the hard call. You carried your people, and now you're carrying their memory. That doesn't make you guilty. That makes you real. And the fact that you're still standing here means you're doing better than you think. He paused. You're not supposed to forget, Alina. You're supposed to remember, so people like Rodriguez don't fade. But you're also supposed to live, so you can carry the weight for the ones who can't anymore. She let out a shaky breath, wiping her face with the sleeve of her hoodie. Martin patted her shoulder. Come on, I know a place that makes a decent cup of coffee and won't judge a woman for carrying ghosts. She nodded slowly. Didn't smile, but didn't resist either. They walked together, 2 Marines from different wars, both broken in places they rarely spoke of. And for the first time since she'd returned home, Alina didn't feel entirely alone. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead as Alina stepped into the community center's rec room, the smell of weak coffee and institutional floor wax hanging thick in the air. Rows of metal folding chairs had been set up in a loose circle, occupied by about a dozen veterans of varying ages, body types, and expressions. Martin had called in a favor and signed her up for a local VA support group that met every Thursday evening. He told her, "Don't go expecting to be saved, just go expecting not to drown for an hour." She wasn't sure what she expected. Therapy never felt right to her, too clinical, too passive, but this felt different. Messier, more raw. She sat in a chair near the back, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on a dusty vent in the ceiling. One hand unconsciously toyed with the edge of her sleeve, as if tugging at it might distract her enough to stay seated. A man in his late 40s stood near the center, clipboard in hand. He wore a black t-shirt that read Combat Corps, still standing, and a prosthetic leg peeked from under his jeans. "All right, folks, glad to see some familiar faces tonight and a new one," he said, nodding toward Alina. "Welcome. I'm Luke, Iraq, 03 to 09. You don't have to speak if you don't want to. Just being here is a good step." A few murmured greetings echoed softly. No one clapped. It wasn't that kind of room. Luke gestured to an older woman, sitting 2 seats down from him. "Bev?" Bev was in her 60s, Navy vet. Her voice was gravel from decades of cigarettes. "I had a dream last night," she said flatly. "About water. The kind of dream where you wake up choking and there's no water in your throat, just fear. You know that feeling?" Nods. Quiet agreement. Alina glanced at the floor. "Been 20 years," Bev continued. "Still can't sleep with my feet under the covers." The next guy, Danny, Army Infantry, talked about his service dog having a meltdown at a fireworks show. Someone else mentioned losing their 3rd job this year because of bad days they couldn't explain to civilian bosses. When it finally circled to her, all eyes turned gently toward her chair. No pressure, no expectation, just space. She cleared her throat, surprised her voice didn't shake. "Sergeant Alina Reyes, Marine Corps, Echo Company, deployed twice to Syria." A few murmurs, a small nod from a man across the circle. Mutual respect. "I didn't come here to talk," she said. "I didn't want to come at all, honestly, but someone told me I might drown less if I sat in this chair." No one laughed, but the smallest smiles passed between a few lips. They knew exactly what she meant. Alina let the silence hang. She looked down at her boots for a moment, then back up. "I lost someone, a Marine in my squad, Rodriguez. He was 19, smiled all the time. 2 couldn't save him." Her voice cracked, and for a second she considered standing up and walking out, but then Luke simply nodded and said, "You carry him. Every one of us carries someone." More nods followed. No platitudes, no pity, just presence. "And sometimes," she added, barely audible, "I wonder why it wasn't me." Now, there was silence, heavy and familiar, the kind of silence that came after confessions in a war zone. It was Bev who spoke up softly. "Because you were meant to come back and tell us about him." Alina swallowed hard. The lump in her throat didn't go away, but it softened. The room didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt like something she hadn't had since returning unit cohesion. People who understood without her having to explain every detail. Luke closed the session with the simple line, "Pain shared is pain halved, even if it's just for tonight." As the chairs scraped the floor and people began to gather their coats, Luke handed Alina a folded piece of paper. "Group meets every week, but if you ever need someone on a Tuesday, or hell, 2 a.m. on a Sunday, call that number. You don't have to wait to fall apart." She tucked the paper into her pocket. Didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. The nod she gave him carried all the weight words couldn't. Outside, the rain had started to fall in light drizzles, pattering on the pavement. Alina pulled up her hood and walked home with slow steps. And for the first time in weeks, the quiet inside her didn't feel quite so violent. The next Saturday, the sky was overcast, and the marine layer hung low over Oceanside, like a heavy blanket. Alina found herself walking the same path she had the week before, past the corner where the bikers had mocked her, past the food truck still grilling carne asada, and toward the little bench outside the post office, where Martin always seemed to materialize like some kind of old war ghost. He was already there, hat on, cane resting across his lap, a cigar between his lips, unlit. "I figured you'd be back," he said without looking up. "You figured wrong," Alina replied, sitting down beside him. "I was walking, didn't realize I ended up here." He chuckled and took the cigar from his mouth, rolling it between two fingers. "Funny how we always seem to walk where the memory takes us." She leaned back against the bench, watching a seagull swoop low over a trash can. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the easy kind, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "You ever smoke one of these?" Martin asked, holding up the cigar. "Once. In Kuwait. Celebratory thing after a mission. Made me sick as hell." He laughed. "That's how you know it's working." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a new one, still wrapped. "Go ahead. Today's not about the nausea. It's about the ritual." Alina hesitated, then took it. She didn't light it, just held it in her hands. It was warm from his pocket. Martin struck a match on the side of the bench and lit his own, puffing slowly. The smell was earthy, strong, oddly comforting. "You ever talk to the dead?" he asked, not looking at her. Alina tilted her head. "You mean like ghosts?" "I mean like Rodriguez or the others." She looked down at the unlit cigar in her hand, thumb tracing the seam. "I talk to them in my head, especially at night, usually asking why them, or apologizing." He nodded. "I do too. Every morning I light one of these. I think of my daughter and the 3 men I left in the jungle. I talk to them like they're sitting right here. Makes me feel less selfish for still breathing." She looked at him. "Selfish?" He took a long drag and exhaled. "Guilt doesn't care about logic, Reyes. Doesn't matter how many medals they pin on your chest or how many people tell you it wasn't your fault. Survivor's guilt hits like shrapnel. Quiet, sharp, and when you least expect it." Alina felt something inside her loosen some truth she hadn't put words to until now. Martin turned toward her, his face more serious. "I need you to understand something," he said. "You came back. Not everyone does. And now that you're here, you don't owe anyone a damn explanation for how you carry your scars, physical or otherwise." She blinked quickly, eyes stinging. "It feels like I'm walking around with a landmine in my chest, like I never really left." "You didn't," he said. "Not fully. But the trick is to start planting yourself here anyway, bit by bit, person by person." Alina looked around at the town, the slow traffic, the sound of distant laughter from the boardwalk, the gentle roll of the ocean a few blocks away. "You think that's possible? Really?" Martin looked her square in the eyes. "I know it is, because I see it in you." She turned the cigar in her fingers again. "You ever think we're just pretending to be okay?" "Hell yes," he said, chuckling. "But pretending's just practice for the real thing. Keep at it long enough, it starts to stick." For the first time, Alina lit the cigar. She didn't cough this time. She just sat there, letting the smoke curl into the air between them, like a quiet offering to the ones they carried. And in that silence between two scarred Marines, between decades of wars and wounds, there was something close to peace. Monday morning came with the jarring buzz of a phone alarm and sunlight sneaking through the blinds like an unwanted visitor. Alina rolled out of bed slowly, her body still sore from a restless night filled with fractured dreams, the kind where she was always running, but never moving. She padded barefoot into the kitchen and poured herself a cup of coffee black, no sugar. The television was on low in the background, some morning news show going on about rising gas prices and celebrity divorces. None of it felt real. She didn't expect the knock on the door. It was early, barely past 9 a.m., too early for visitors. She tensed instinctively, placing the mug down with a soft clink and stepping silently to the peephole. It was Martin. She opened the door, eyebrow raised. "Didn't expect you to be the drop-by unannounced type." Martin grinned and held up a folded piece of paper. "I'm full of surprises." She let him in, and he settled onto the couch like he'd been there 100 times. "I've got a friend," he started. "Retired Master Gunnery Sergeant. Runs a nonprofit downtown that connects returning vets with jobs in the area. They've got openings. Admin work, warehouse coordination, even peer-to-peer support stuff. Alina leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You want me to be a receptionist? I want you to try, he said. Try something. Anything. Something that makes the days less long. Something that reminds you there's life after this. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the photo she hadn't meant to keep on her Phrygia snapshot from her squad's going-away dinner. Rodriguez in the background, throwing peace signs, chicken wing in hand. That night had been loud and full of terrible karaoke and laughter, the kind that used to feel like armor. Martin placed the paper on her table and stood up. They'll meet with you. No suit required. Just your name and your time. As he left, he paused in the doorway. You don't have to do it for you. Do it for Rodriguez. He'd want you to have more than just a memory. The door closed softly behind him. Alina stared at the paper for a long time. Later that afternoon, she found herself in front of a modest office building tucked between a strip mall and a tire shop. A banner over the door read, Mission Forward, Veterans, Veterans. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and new carpet. The receptionista, young man with a prosthetic hand, smiled and gestured toward a small room where a woman waited behind a desk stacked with papers. The woman stood. Sergeant Reyes? I'm Dana, Navy, 98 to 07. Sit. Let's talk. Alina sat, unsure what to say. Dana didn't beat around the bush. I read your service record. 2 deployments. Combat leadership. Silver Star. Why aren't you leading something? I'm not ready, Alina said honestly. Dana nodded, understanding. Then let's start small. We run a mentorship program, pair veterans who've just come home with someone who gets it. Not a therapist, just someone who's been in the dust. Alina looked up. You want me to mentor someone? I want you to be what no one was for me when I came back, Dana said, and maybe help yourself in the process. It was terrifying. It was sudden. It was unexpected. But it didn't feel wrong. That evening, Alina called Martin. I went. There was a pause on the line, then a soft, proud laugh. Of course you did. They want me to help someone. New returnee. Young, angry, sounds familiar. Martin's voice grew gentle. That's how you make peace with the ghosts, Reyes. You lead someone else home. The office was quiet, the kind of quiet that held the edge of something about to erupt. Alina sat in the waiting area of Mission Forward, watching the second hand tick around the clock on the wall. She hadn't been this nervous since her first patrol. A door opened down the hall. Dana stepped out with a clipboard and a knowing look. She's here. Brace yourself. Alina stood. That bad? Dana smirked. You'll see. Moments later, a young woman walked in, maybe 22, maybe younger, hard to tell under the tough exterior. Combat boots, torn jeans, oversized hoodie with the hood pulled low. She didn't look around the room, just muttered, "This is stupid," and kept walking. Dana gave Alina a nod. Specialist Rowan Carter, Dana said, catching the girl before she could bolt. Army, Afghanistan, recently discharged, honorably though, not quietly. Alina, meet your shadow. Rowan rolled her eyes and finally looked up just long enough to size Alina up. Great, babysitter's a Marine. Alina didn't flinch. And you're clearly thrilled to be here. Guess we both got shafted. Dana raised her hands. You two get acquainted. I'll be in my office pretending this isn't a disaster. She left them in the break room, a cramped space with a coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned since the Obama administration. Alina leaned against the counter. So, you want to tell me what your deal is? Or are we skipping the pleasantries? Rowan crossed her arms. I did my job, followed orders, then got sent home like I was someone else's problem. Alina met her eyes, steady and unwavering. You are someone else's problem. That's why I'm here. Funny, Rowan said. Didn't ask for a mentor. Didn't ask to come home either, did you? That stopped her. Alina stepped forward, her voice low but sharp. I know that look in your eye, the anger, the shame you cover with sarcasm. You've got one hand still clenched in the war and the other too afraid to reach for anything here. Rowan bristled. You think you know me? I am you, Alina said. 5 years ahead. Same nightmares. Same weight. Same disbelief that people out here are arguing about Wi-Fi while you're still unpacking what it means to lose someone who called you sis one day and bled out in your lap the next. Rowan turned her head, jaw tight. I'm not broken, she said finally. No, Alina replied. You're just bleeding in places no one can see. They stood in silence. The hum of the old fridge filled the space. Then, softer, Alina added, let's start easy. Coffee and 20 minutes. You get to rant. I won't stop you. Rowan hesitated, then muttered, black, no sugar. Alina poured them both a cup. She didn't smile, didn't try to be warm or reassuring. She just sat across from her, 2 steaming mugs between them, and waited. Rowan finally spoke, voice low. They told me I was good. I believed them. Then the mission went sideways. I followed orders. People died. Suddenly, I was the girl who should have known better. Alina nodded. You still carrying it? Like a rucksack full of bricks. Alina took a sip. Good, let's unpack it together. Brick by brick. For the first time, Rowan looked at her not through her, but at her. And for the briefest second, something in her posture softened. The wall hadn't come down, but maybe, just maybe, a crack had formed. Alina never expected progress to be a straight line, but with Rowan, it wasn't even a line at all. It was more like a slow grind across broken glass. 2 weeks into the mentorship, they met at Mission Forward 3 times a week. It started with coffee and long silences. Then came the story's fragments of missions, snapshots of terror, little moments dropped like loose change. Rowan didn't share much at first, but she listened, closely. Sometimes, too closely. So, Rowan said one afternoon, lounging in a plastic chair like it offended her, what really happened to that scar on your head? Alina froze. It was the first time Rowan had asked about her past. She could lie. She could laugh it off. But that wasn't the deal. A mortar strike, Alina said after a pause. We were rescuing civilians. My guy, Rodriguez, was right beside me. Blast came down fast. I got lucky. He didn't. Rowan didn't blink. And you've been blaming yourself ever since. It wasn't a question. Alina looked down. Yeah. Rowan leaned forward. So you get it. You get what it's like to come back and feel like the war followed you home. Like there's shrapnel in your soul nobody else can see. Alina nodded slowly. I get it. Rowan stared out the window. I don't sleep much. When I do, I see it all again. My CO's face when he realized we were in the wrong building. The kid that ran out. The one I didn't shoot fast enough. I hesitated. Just a second. He had a trigger in his hand. Silence. I don't know what's worse, she whispered. That I hesitated or that I had to kill a kid. Alina's throat tightened. She reached across the table and placed her hand over Rowan's bicep. No words, just presence. That's when Rowan broke. Her shoulders curled forward, the tears coming hard, and fast fists clenched, jaw tight. Not the kind of crying that needed comfort, the kind that had waited too long to be heard. Alina sat with her, letting her cry, letting it happen without rushing it away. Later, when Rowan had quieted and wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, she said, They gave me a medal. Can you believe that? Told me I showed incredible bravery under duress. I almost threw it in the trash. Alina gave a soft snort. I have one in a sock drawer somewhere. Still smells like the desert. Rowan looked up. Why did they do that? Because they don't know what else to give us, Alina said. They want to mark the pain with something shiny. They sat there a while longer. The clock ticked on. The office bustled softly outside. Voices distant. Life going on. Then Rowan asked something Alina hadn't expected. You ever think about not coming back? Like just disappearing? Alina didn't answer right away. I used to, she finally said. Used to think maybe the world didn't need me anymore. That everything I was good at died over there. She paused. But then I met someone, an old Marine. He reminded me that the fight doesn't end just because you make it home. Sometimes the hardest fight is staying. Rowan nodded slow. Martin? Alina smiled faintly. Yeah, the guy's like a war ghost in a windbreaker. Rowan laughed. A real one. Short, rough, but real. Think I could meet him sometime? Alina met her gaze. Yeah, I think he'd like that. Rowan stood, brushing her sleeves down. Same time next week? Alina stood too. Same time. As Rowan left, Alina exhaled deeply. Her shoulders relaxed, her chest a little lighter. For the first time, mentoring didn't feel like giving something away. It felt like reclaiming something herself. Brick by brick, the flyer had arrived in Alina's mailbox, tucked between an overdue electric bill and a pizza coupon. Camp Pendleton Annual Memorial, honoring the fallen. A ceremony for those lost in recent deployments. Names etched into a granite wall. A 21-gun salute, taps, speeches, silence. She hadn't gone in years. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. She sat on the edge of her bed that morning, uniform pressed and folded on the chair beside her. Her hand hovered over the fabric, the chevrons, the ribbon bar, the silver star tucked beneath the others like it embarrassed her. She hadn't worn this in months, not since Rodriguez's funeral. A knock interrupted her spiral. Martin stood on the other side, wearing his dress blues, complete with white gloves and polished brass buttons. He looked like time had stepped back 40 years. I figured you'd need a ride, he said. No preamble. Alina didn't respond, just stepped aside to let him in. 20 minutes later, she emerged in full uniform. No makeup, hair tight, posture straighter than it had been in weeks. Martin gave a low whistle. Now that's the Sergeant Reyes I remember. She didn't smile, but her nod said enough. They arrived at the base chapel, where rows of white chairs were lined up in front of the stone memorial. The crowd was modest, mostly Marines, families, and a scattering of Gold Star mothers, with eyes like broken glass. Alina scanned the etched names as she approached. Rodriguez, M.A. Stafford, J.T. Hernandez, C.R. Each one stopped her breath, like punches to the chest. She stood motionless, fingers twitching at her side. Her throat burned. Martin stepped beside her and saluted. She followed suit, her hand trembling. A Marine chaplain approached the podium and began the ceremony. Words like honor, sacrifice, bravery floated through the air, but they sounded distant to Alina, muffled by the storm behind her eyes. When the last post played, the trumpet's cry pierced every part of her that was still tender. And then, the flag ceremony, the folding, the presentation, the silence. Rodriguez's mother was there. Alina hadn't expected that. She was older than Alina imagined, short, dressed in black, her eyes raw and ringed with red. She held a folded flag in her lap, like it was made of glass. Her hands never stopped moving, nervous fingers smoothing invisible wrinkles. Alina's feet moved before her brain did. She stepped forward, heart racing, legs unsure. Mrs. Rodriguez? She asked quietly. The woman looked up. Alina's voice cracked. I served with your son. I was with him when he... The mother stood. Without a word, she reached out and pulled Alina into an embrace. Tight, fierce. No permission asked, no explanation needed. I know who you are, she whispered. He talked about you in his letters. Said you were the only one in command who didn't act like a robot. He respected you. Alina's tears came fast and uncontrollably. She clung to the woman who had lost everything and was somehow still offering comfort. I'm sorry, she choked. I tried. I really tried. Mrs. Rodriguez stroked her back. I know. And I'm proud he served with someone who carried him home. When they finally pulled apart, Alina felt lighter but not empty. There was grief, yes, but also grace. Martin was waiting when she returned to her seat. He said nothing, just handed her a small white handkerchief from his pocket and looked out toward the ocean. That night, Alina returned to her apartment and sat at the table with Rodriguez's letter to his mother, the one she had never mailed. It wasn't needed anymore. But she didn't throw it away. She folded it one final time, tucked it into a small box beside her medals, and placed it on the shelf above her bed. Then she lay down and, for once, fell asleep without waking from the weight of dreams. It had been nearly 2 months since the food truck parking lot, since the scar, the cap, the humiliation, since Alina had stood without raising a fist and still won the battle. She hadn't seen Rocco since. Until now. It was a Sunday morning at the Oceanside Community Center. Alina was early for a vet-focused volunteer day organizing canned goods, supplies, and care packages for deployed units. She wore jeans, a faded Semper Fi t-shirt, and a fresh sense of calm that had taken a long time to earn. The building buzzed with activity. Vets of all ages moved in and out, talking, laughing, sharing coffee and grief in equal measure. And then, near the back table, she saw him. Rocco. He was quieter now, not surrounded by bikers, not drinking. He stood alone, carefully arranging donated hygiene kits into boxes, one item at a time. No leather vest today, just a long-sleeved flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal the same faded tattoos. For a moment, Alina froze. Everything came rushing back: the heat, the words, the stares, the scar. Her fingers curled slightly. He hadn't seen her yet. She could walk away, but she didn't. Instead, she walked toward him, steady, controlled, but with a fire in her chest she refused to hide. He looked up when she reached the table, and the moment he saw her, it was like someone had drained the blood from his face. Rocco straightened, eyes dropping instinctively to the floor. "Sergeant." She said nothing at first. "Didn't expect to see you here," he added, voice low. "Clearly," she replied. He cleared his throat, visibly shaken. "I've been trying to change some things." She looked him dead in the eyes. "Because you got filmed being a jackass? Or because you finally saw yourself clearly?" His shoulders slumped. "Both." A long pause stretched between them. The noise of the room fell away. "I was drunk," he said. "Not an excuse. I was angry. About a lot of things. Felt invisible. Useless. Like I had no fight left in me unless I started one. And you picked the smallest target you could find and tried to make her feel smaller," she said, voice calm but sharp. Rocco nodded. "I know." Alina crossed her arms. "What are you doing here?" He gestured to the boxes. "Court-ordered community service. Assault charge from a bar fight. This place lets me log my hours helping other vets." He paused. "Figured it was time I started helping instead of hurting." She studied him, really studied him. The lines in his face, the way his hand shook slightly when he picked up a bottle of mouthwash. He looked older than she remembered. "You ever serve?" she asked. He shook his head. "My brother did. Iraq. Didn't come home. I was always the screw-up. I used to say stupid stuff like, he died for nothing. Truth is, he died being braver than I'll ever be." Alina's eyes softened just slightly. "Then don't let his name rot in your guilt," she said. "Live in a way that honors him, not just by putting things in boxes, but by changing how you see people who wear the uniform." He nodded slowly. "I've been going to meetings, anger management, vet support stuff. Got a long way to go." "Good," she said. "Keep walking." Then, after a pause, she added, "You're lucky. You got the chance to change. Most of the people I lost didn't." He looked down again. "I'm sorry. For what I did. For what I said." "I'm not the one you owe," she said. "You owe yourself better. And you owe the people watching to be the man you pretend to be when no one's looking." Rocco nodded. Shame all over his face, but also something else. Humility. He turned back to his box, picking up a pair of socks and gently folding them into place. Alina walked away. Not because she needed to escape, but because she had nothing left to prove. And as she passed by a group of young volunteers, one of them whispered, "Was that the woman from the video? The Marine?" Alina didn't stop. but she let the corner of her mouth twitch upward, just a bit. Yes, that was her. The sky broke open in the middle of the night. Alina sat upright in bed, drenched in sweat, chest heaving, heart pounding like it was trying to claw its way out of her body. She had the dream again. The flash, the sound, the dust. Rodriguez reaching for her only this time. His face was gone, a blur, a void where a friend should have been. She stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping over her boots, and collapsed onto the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, gasping. She couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. Her fingers clawed at the carpet as if she could dig herself out of it. Then her body gave up. She screamed. Not loud, not full of rage, but guttural, broken. A sound no one else was meant to hear. Except someone did. There was pounding at the door minutes later. Then Martin's voice panicked, raw. Alina, open up. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. He entered with the spare key she'd given him weeks ago, just in case, and found her crumpled in the hallway between the bedroom and the kitchen, knees drawn in, trembling. Jesus Christ. He dropped beside her, slower than he would have 20 years ago, but just as sure. Alina didn't look at him. Her breath was shallow, her voice barely audible. I can't do this anymore. Martin didn't touch her. He knew better. He sat beside her, legs stretched out, his cane clattering to the floor. Yes, you can. I'm tired, she whispered. So tired. Every time I close my eyes, he's there. The ones I lost, the decisions, the orders I gave. I can't live like this. I'm not living. You're grieving, he said. The military doesn't teach us how to do that. They teach us to press on, to keep moving. But grief waits. And eventually it takes you to the ground. Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't sobbing. It wasn't that kind of cry. It was the deep, hollow weeping that came from somewhere unreachable. I never wanted to come home, she admitted. I felt more human over there, even when I was broken. Here, I don't know who I am. Martin leaned his head back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. You're a woman who gave everything, and when you came back, the world didn't know what to do with you. So you buried it all and tried to function like nothing shattered, but it did. And now, you need to mourn. How? She asked, voice barely more than a breath. By letting yourself fall apart and letting someone see it. Not just tonight. Every time the weight comes, you have to stop pretending you're the strongest one in the room. You've got to stop trying to carry it alone. She looked at him then, eyes red, face bare, soul open. I don't want to die, Martin, but I'm scared I don't know how to live. He reached over not with a hand, but with his voice. Then let me help you remember, day by day, breath by breath. They sat there for what felt like hours. The storm outside rolled on, thunder humming low and constant. Eventually, Alina's breathing steadied, her fingers uncurled. She leaned her head on Martin's shoulder, just slightly. He didn't speak. And in the silence, something shifted. Not everything was fixed, but something was finally released. The world didn't change overnight, but something inside Alina had. She still woke at 0400 out of habit, still flinched at sharp sounds, still reached for her weapon in dreams that had long since stopped making sense. But now, she talked. Not just in group, not just to Martin. She started texting Rowan on days they didn't meet. Alina, you sleep last night? Rowan, define sleep. Alina, no screaming? Rowan, just mild existential dread. 7/10. Alina, that's a win. Don't downplay it. Rowan, want to hit the range this weekend? She said yes. And when they went, Alina let Rowan outshoot her on purpose. Not because she wanted to coddle her, but because watching the younger woman focus and succeed reminded her of something she'd forgotten, how much strength there was in letting go of control. At Mission Forward, she began taking on more hours mentoring new returnees, helping coordinate events, organizing calls to families and units still deployed. She found herself drawn not to the dramatic stories, but the small ones. A vet who hadn't left his house in a year finally coming in for a haircut. A mother of 3 writing her first resume. A young Marine opening up in group, crying for the first time in public. One morning, Dana pulled her aside. "You've got something, Reyes. People follow you. They feel safe with you. You ever think about staying on here? Full time?" Alina blinked. "You mean like a job?" "I mean a mission," Dana said. "Not combat, not orders, but a reason to keep moving forward." Alina didn't answer then. But later that night, she sat with Martin on the pier. He lit a cigar. She sipped coffee. The waves below crashed steadily, like a heartbeat she could finally trust. "They want me to stay on," she said. "I figured they would," he replied. "I'm scared if I say yes, it means I'm leaving the others behind, like I'm moving on without them." Martin stared at the horizon. "You don't move on from people you lost. You move with them, carry them forward, let them guide you." Alina looked up at the stars. Her eyes were tired but not defeated. "I think I want to stay. I think I'm ready." "Then that's your next battle," Martin said, exhaling smoke into the night. "And I think you're gonna win it." The following week, Alina showed up early to group. She didn't sit in the back. She took the chair next to Luke and opened the meeting. "I'm Sergeant Alina Reyes," she said, "and I'm finally learning how to live." No one clapped. They didn't need to. But Luke gave her a nod that spoke volumes, and across the circle, Rowan beamed behind her hoodie. That evening, back in her apartment, Alina lit a small candle and opened her old wooden box. She pulled out the photo of her unit, looked at Rodriguez's grin, the mischief in his eyes. She whispered, "You see me now?" And in the quiet, she almost heard him laugh. It was the same food truck, the same lot, same sizzle of carne asada on the grill, same music drifting faintly from the speaker tucked in the corner, an old Eagles song today. But everything had changed. Alina stood in line, wearing jeans and a black hoodie with the sleeves pushed up, her hair a little longer now, the scar on her temple faded but still visible. A badge clipped to her belt read, "Veteran Peer Coordinator, Mission Forward." She waited patiently, hands in her pockets. This time, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She wasn't shrinking or bracing or hiding. She was just there. Behind her, Rowan stood with a paper cup of coffee and a sarcastic grin. "You still order the same tacos every time. You've got the culinary range of a brick." Alina smirked. "When something works, you stick with it." Rowan nudged her. "Still, live a little. Add onions or something. Don't push your luck." They laughed. Near the front of the truck, a young Marine with a prosthetic arm was arguing over payment, trying to convince the vendor to take less than the total because he'd lost his wallet. The vendor was shaking his head, polite but firm. Alina stepped forward and placed a bill on the counter. "Put his meal on mine." The Marine blinked. "You don't have to." "I know," she said, "but someone once reminded me that we carry each other. That's how we get home." He looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. "Thanks, Sergeant." She smiled. "Alina's fine." Rowan leaned close. "Look at you, doing good deeds in public. It's disgusting." "Shut up and eat your tacos." They found the same bench from months ago, the one where she'd sat alone after Rocco's harassment, trying to hold herself together. Now, she sat with someone beside her. And for the first time, the scar didn't feel like a weakness. It felt like a story. Martin joined them not long after, cane tapping, cigar in his mouth. He eased onto the bench with a grunt of old joints and war wounds. "Crowded today," he said, eyeing the trucks. "Free samples," Rowan muttered, licking salsa off her fingers. "The whole city showed up." Alina handed him a taco. "No onions," she said. He raised a brow. "You do love me." They ate in comfortable silence. People walked past. Some recognized her from the viral video. Some didn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Alina no longer carried the weight alone. What mattered was that Rowan was laughing again, that Martin was still standing, that Rodriguez's memory wasn't buried, it was carried every day. In her work, in her words, in her presence. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned to embers, Alina stood up and walked to the edge of the lot. She looked out over the ocean, wind brushing against her face. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm still here. I'm still fighting." Behind her, Martin and Rowan watched in silence. They didn't speak. They didn't need to, because they knew what she had become. Not just a survivor, not just a soldier, but a guardian of the fallen, a bridge for the broken, a woman still healing and still standing.